Pushkin. One morning last December, my co-host Jess McHugh and our producer Amy Gaines McQuaid traveled to Rhode Island to sit down with a woman named Rosemarie Coffey.
Oh, he's going to bark at the mailman.
Like all good dogs do.
Boo. Leave Frank alone.
That's Rosemary talking to her dog, Boo. When Jess and Amy arrived, Rosemary had pastries from a local bakery waiting for them. And Rosemary, she likes to take care of people like this. She's 60 years old and recently retired. But before that, she spent her career supporting people when they're at their most vulnerable. She worked as a community support specialist. And for a time, Rosemary took care of Sarah Cavanaugh.
Well, I worked with her, I'm guessing, 3 years.
Wow.
So.
And it's up to the end, so it would have
right, exactly to the point.
Sarah enrolled in the Wounded Warrior Independence Program. It's designed for veterans with life-changing injuries. And it was through this program that Wounded Warrior paid for Rosemary's services.
What did you understand her physical injuries to be?
She had the traumatic brain injury. She had a prosthetic hip, supposedly, and she was also going through cancer treatment. The prosthetic, the brain injury, and the PTSD were the primary challenges.
She still remembers the first time that she showed up to Sarah's house.
At the time, Sarah was like curled up in a blanket in the, on the couch in front of the window, just looking out the window, all forlorn and shy and withdrawn. And according to the case manager, she wasn't getting adjusted to the community, and she really needed a lot of support. If you can just picture that person that's just not been able to do anything, or go anywhere, or, really struggling, that was the persona that she put out there.
Throughout our reporting, Jess and I had heard these stories about Sarah running down mountain trails and competing in epic workout challenges. But this was an entirely different Sarah we were hearing about. Rosemary worked with Sarah right up until Sarah's double life came crashing down. Throughout all that time, Sarah let Rosemary into her home, into her life, and we wondered, what did Rosemary see? Turns out, she saw and heard an awful lot, some of which has major implications for our story. It suggests that there may have been someone else helping Sarah with her deception, a possible accomplice.
I couldn't even tell you a name. I couldn't even tell you necessarily who I suspected, but there were a couple incidents when somebody had to call Sarah's caseworker at the VA. Then Sarah's standing in the room, so it wasn't Sarah. So who was on the other end of the phone?
Welcome back to Deep Cover Season 6, The Truth About Sarah. This is Rosemary's story. Rosemary has worked with people living with disabilities for decades. And if there's one thing she's learned, it's that every case is different.
So there isn't a set blueprint for working with someone with brain injury. It's different in the sense of each person's injury manifests itself in different ways.
Rosemary told us that most of the people that she works with have had their worlds turned upside down, and they're still trying to find their footing.
So they've had pretty much a normal life leading up to this injury, and then they may have had a car accident, a stroke, a brain tumor, and then everything changes, including personality changes. So that's part of it that you wouldn't see with other disabilities necessarily.
Her job? helping people get back into the world, running errands, doing chores, the simple stuff, which is no longer so simple. And that's where Rosemary comes in. That's what she started doing for Sarah.
At the time I met her, supposedly she couldn't even go into a store. She couldn't go to a Target. She couldn't go grocery shopping. She couldn't, take care of her household.
Rosemary believed Sarah was dealing with PTSD. So she tried to break things down, make simple tasks even simpler.
Okay, your first task is to try to just go into Target, get one item and go through the register, and that's a success. Or we'd go, make a grocery list. Like, what do I need? What am I going to eat this week?
And Rosemary was told certain things were going to be hard for Sarah.
Okay, these are things emotionally she needs to address, going out in the community. Like the DMV would have been a big trigger for her, to do that by herself.
So Rosemary went with her to the DMV to get special Purple Heart plates for her car. You might remember Sarah claimed she earned a Purple Heart in combat. Somehow she had the paperwork to back that claim up, and she got the plates. Without even realizing it, or meaning to, Rosemary had played a small role in helping Sarah deepen her deception. As they spent more time together, Rosemary and Sarah began to form a bond.
So I was supporting her. And of course, when you're doing that, you want to build a rapport. You want to have the person be comfortable. So I was willing to do the things with her. Let's say she's got to do laundry. Well, I'm not just going to stand there with a clipboard, and talk at her.
Instead, Rosemary said, "Let's chat as we fold the clothes." And over time, Rosemary became a sounding board for Sarah.
She talked about things that bothered her. She talked about relationships. She talked about family. She was always talking about financial troubles that was weighing on her.
The version of Sarah that we kept hearing about from other people was tough, unbreakable, always smiling through the pain. The kind of person people held up as a hero. But Rosemary saw something else, something that seemed more tender and fragile.
I would say about 99% of the time when I arrived at her home, she was in tears.
Wow.
She was anxious. She was worked up. There was things that had happened. And then, we would talk and she would calm down and then we'd say, okay, what's the plan? And we would, be able to move on to an activity that she orchestrated that we should do.
One of these things was physical therapy.
She wanted to start physical therapy, and the organization was paying for it, Wounded Warrior. And so she was nervous about going to the first visit, so I took her to her first visit with Sam.
Yep, Rosemary says she took Sarah to her very first appointment with Sam, the physical therapist she went on to become romantically involved with. At first, nothing stood out to Rosemary, but over time, she came to understand that Sarah's relationship with Sam had evolved.
It took a long time before I saw evidence there was something else with Sam. And I'm trying to be professional. I'm not going to delve into, obviously she'd just gotten married, not long before.
Rosemary knew Nicole, Sarah's wife at the time. She spent many hours in the home that they shared. And she did her best to stay out of this whole mess and just stick to her job. Being a community support specialist, well, it's tricky work. You get pulled into people's lives, the mess, the chaos. Rosemary kept her focus, helped the person in front of you. What she didn't know was just how messy it really was. In early 2022, as Sarah's lies were falling apart, Rosemary arrived at Sarah's house to help with an errand. The moment she got there, she sensed it, an unsettling tension in the air, like everything was on edge.
I show up, she's outside. She's not even in the house. She's outside. She's anxious. She's got the plates in her hand. She's got the paperwork. She was just like, we have to go to the DMV. I have to return these plates. They're causing so much problems. I just want to get rid of them.
Sarah was desperate to return those Purple Heart license plates. It was a request that seemed to baffle the DMV staff. But Sarah just wanted those plates gone.
The staff at the DMV were like so nice, and they were trying to get at what was going on. Like, why do you want to return these? Is somebody harassing you? Like, because we can help you. We'll contact whoever we need to help you with this. If you should feel like you earned these. And she's like, no, I just have to get rid of it. I don't want to talk about it.
Soon after this, reports about Sarah's fraud started circulating. Rosemary was at home when her husband showed her an article that revealed Sarah's deception.
My husband came to me and said, "Is this Sarah in the news?" He's showing me on his phone. I was just like, oh my God, they really have, gone out of their way to hurt her. Oh my God, poor Sarah. Was my first response. I was like reaching out to her and be like, are you okay?
But so initially it sounds like your reaction is disbelief.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I had no reason to doubt her. And I was just like, what are these people doing to her? Oh my God, is she okay? Call her right away. And I just said to her, are you okay? And she's like, well, no. And I was like, well, if it's not true, you have to defend yourself, Sarah, And she's like, I can't. She said, I can't. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, I can't defend myself. And then I was like, well, tell me, what's going on? And she's like, I can't talk. I'll call you right back. I'm getting another call. And then she hung up, and that was it.
Rosemarie soon learned about the investigation into Sarah's fraud and what the feds had begun to discover. And she came to the unsettling realization that she had been deceived for years. In some ways, Rosemarie knew Sarah so intimately, but in other ways, she didn't know her at all. We asked Rosemarie if she knew whether Sarah had a job, and turns out she had no idea Sarah was a social worker at the VA in Providence. Now, granted, she did only work for Sarah part-time, roughly 6 hours a week. She knew that Sarah visited the VA pretty often, and she knew this because sometimes she drove Sarah there.
I've taken her to the VA, so I have no idea what I took her to, but definitely dropped her off and waited in the car, and that kind of thing.
Part of what made Sarah's story so convincing to Rosemarie and others we interviewed was the fact that someone from Sarah's healthcare team was in contact with them. This person's name was Ivy. Supposedly, Ivy was a social worker at the VA assigned to managing Sarah's care.
She had a lot of talks about the social worker, Ivy, at the VA. So that's what I thought was going on.
But what was really going on with Ivy? Well, that's something we're all still trying to figure out. More on that after the break. A few people we've interviewed, including Rosemarie, say they spoke with someone claiming to be Ivy. Rosemarie told us about one conference call in particular. It was a check-in with Sarah's healthcare team. Rosemarie was on the line, as was a case manager from the Wounded Warrior Project. And then there was Ivy from the VA, offering updates on Sarah's care.
So she would go on and talk about her medical situation, the cancer, what they were trying to do there. So I'd be there with Sarah, and then the other two were on conference call.
And so Sarah was in the room with you.
Yes.
So she couldn't have been the one on the phone.
Right. And that was the case as well another time. Some other woman was speaking, and as Ivy.
The question that now comes up, the one that Rosemarie still thinks about, and the one that we still think about a lot, is this. Who is on the phone pretending to be Ivy, offering these made-up details about how Sarah's treatment was going? It wasn't Sarah, because on that particular call, Sarah was sitting in the room with Rosemarie. So it had to be someone else, someone who was complicit in Sarah's lies.
So there had to be other people involved.
Right.
There absolutely had to be, because I clearly remember at least 2 times when Ivy was on the phone. But yeah, there had to be another person.
We talked to Tom Donnelly about this. If you recall, he's the in-house investigator at the VA's Office of Inspector General. Donnelly's thought about this a lot.
We could never prove that another person was involved, but it's evidence that leads me to believe that 100% somebody else was involved.
Donnelly told us there really is someone named Ivy who works for the Providence VA. But investigators had interviewed her over the course of their investigation, and they felt convinced that she was not in on this in any way. We actually got in touch with the real Ivy, and she told us, quote, "I knew Sarah from the time she was a social work intern. We would eat lunch together, and although she never pretended to be a veteran with me or other coworkers, she would tell us story after story about her large military family. I was shocked to learn that they never existed, and was appalled when I was questioned by federal agents investigating whether or not I was involved in her schemes." She went on to say, "More appalling than her using my name was the grift that she had been running for years, duping many organizations and betraying the trust of so many veterans, like the ones that she was receiving a salary to help." All of this has led investigators to believe there had to have been someone else, someone impersonating Ivy, on a series of phone calls.
Like, we figured out who Ivy's phone number was. Ivy's phone number was Sarah's VA-issued government cell phone. So I don't know where that phone was or who had it, but we do know that it was used.
In other words, Donnelly thinks someone was using Sarah's work phone to fake the whole thing, calling people pretending to be Ivy. But if it wasn't Sarah, well then, who was it? That question has yet to be answered. Maybe one day we'll find out. Before Rosemarie learned about Sarah's lies, she says she was never really suspicious. She felt nothing but empathy for Sarah.
You see, this person has been impacted and her life has been so impaired, and she's so young. I mean, it really pulled on your heart. There's no question about it. Everybody who met her felt sorry for her. Every time, everyone wanted to help her.
Rosemarie became so attached to Sarah that even after retiring in 2021, she continued to help her, volunteering her time for free.
I just knew I had to be there for her. Like, I felt when she reacted that she wasn't going to have my contact, and she felt so lost, and there was just so much going on that I wanted to be there for her. I wanted to be able to say, "You can call me anytime. I'm here for you." And she was like, "Great, okay." You know, never said, "Oh, you don't have to do that," or, you know, "I don't want," you know, she definitely just let me do it.
That's really generous of you.
I don't know. I mean, you can't work in this career, in this field, and not care. You know what? You can't. That's just, you know, it doesn't make me any kind of a special person. It's just, that's where I was at, you know, at the time.
The last time Rosemarie saw Sarah was on the day of the sentencing in March of 2023. Rosemarie was there in the courtroom, surrounded by people who were angry and demanding justice.
by that time, sympathy had worn off. And everybody just wanted to see her be held accountable, So basically it was Sarah and her attorney, and then a whole bunch of other people just, rooting for her to go to jail.
At sentencing, Rosemarie connected with many other people in Sarah's orbit, like Michelle, the gym buddy, and Dave, the VFW commander. Rosemarie had felt hurt and embarrassed that she'd fallen for Sarah's schemes, but when she looked around, she started to see the bigger picture, and it put things into perspective.
So many people got scammed. I mean, that's where I stopped beating myself up, was people smarter than me got scammed, in a lot larger ways. All the times all of us could have intersected. Somehow we didn't, but it just didn't happen. Oh, God, I just wish I could have saved some grief for people.
I just wish I could have saved some grief for people. It felt like Rosemarie was basically saying, if only I had figured this out, maybe we could have avoided this whole mess. The fallout from Sarah's actions was far-reaching, but one of the cruelest outcomes is that someone like Rosemarie would be left feeling even a little bit responsible, blaming herself for her own generosity, wondering if that very kindness did more harm than good. Of course, she's not to blame. But sometimes it's not so easy for her to see it this way. At the very end of this interview, our producer Amy asked Rosemarie a final question about Sarah.
Is there anything that you would want to ask her, or do you think that you'll connect with her after she's in prison?
No. I think everybody just probably wants to know why, but you'd never get an answer that you could trust. If I asked her why, I wouldn't get a real honest, so what would I really ask, It's just a part of my past and time to move on.
So many people in this story were deceived. Rosemarie saw this for herself at the sentencing hearing. But the human mind, it's a curious thing. It's not always governed by rationality or self-love. Our friends may tell us we did no wrong. We may yearn to believe them, and perhaps we should. But in quiet moments, late at night, the mind often wrestles with guilt, regret, and recriminations. Feelings that defy logic, but, hard as we may try, prove impossible to quiet. And in this way, Sarah's story lives on.
I don't think it ends. That's what I worry about. I guess the biggest thing I wonder is what she's going to do after, because how do you come out of jail and having done this and have some kind of a normal life? She's going to have to create another set of lies. She's not going to just come out and say, yeah, I just went to prison because I scammed all these people and I stole valor. And, so I don't think it stops. That's what I'm afraid of.
These last words, they've stayed with me. I find them haunting. As storytellers, we're always chasing after the elusive perfect endings, looking for that final note of closure. But as long as people remember, and as long as they're willing to ask that most human of questions, what if? Then there is no end. Not really. Only more questions that spin into the night. This episode was produced by Amy Gaines McQuaid, Jess McHugh, Tali Emlin, and Sonia Gerwit. It was edited by Karen Shakurji. Our executive producer is Jacob Smith. Original music from Luis Guerra. Mastering by Sarah Bruguer. Special thanks to Owen Miller, Lucy Sullivan, Jake Flanagan, Sarah Nix, and Greta Cohn. I'm Jake Halpern.